I think if we were having this conversation 15 years ago, it would have been very different. I remember writing articles lamenting that no one in Britain or the US read translated fiction. But now that's changed a lot. As several of the modern classics, contemporary books too, have been translated. So why this change?
Well, I think in terms of Catalan, what was central was the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2007, when Catalonia was the invited guest. It meant that publishers focused globally on Catalan. Before actually the Frankfurt Book Fair, I got my first commission to translate a novel from Catalan. I hadn't published any translations from Catalan before, and I got a commission from Peter Owen, from Simon Smith, an editor. He said, would you be interested in translating a novel by Quim Monzó, La magnitude de la tragedia, the enormity of the tragedy? I got the contract in September 2006, and the book came out in 2007 when the Frankfurt Book Fair took place. And immediately after that, I got another commission from the Comma Press in Manchester to do a book of short stories by Empar Moliner.
All right.
I Like You When I'm Drunk.
I found that in 2013, which was 6 years after Frankfurt, there was actually 8 translations from a Catalan which you translated, 8 publications into English, 8 publications into English from Catalan which you translated, which was an interesting mix looking at them. There was another Monzó, 1,000 Morons. There was one by Teresa Solana, there was one by Francesc Serés, all contemporary novelists, and then there were the Catalan classics. I mean, I think you've done not all, but a lot of the relatively modern, the 20th century Catalan classics. And you did in Diamond Square, which I can hold up now, which I found on my shelves, which is not the first translation, but it's quite a bold translation. The 2 translations done before of Rudereda's in Diamond Square kept very closely to the text, and you were a lot more flexible. You changed the names, and I wanted to ask you about that. Why did you change the names in the Rudereda book?
Well, I don't think I wouldn't necessarily say I'm much more flexible. I think that Edith O'Shiel's translation, which is the first translation,
in the 60s,
is very interesting because she gives it an Irish dimension. The dialogue is in Irish English. I mean, she's from Dublin, and she married a lecturer at Manchester Institute of Technology, and she was a lecturer in German at Manchester University. And they went back to Barcelona on Christmas, and she picked up a copy of La Plaça del Diamant, read it, and immediately kind of identified with it and wanted to translate it, because her father had been a militant, in the Irish Republican Army in Dublin against the British in the kind of 1917, and so she kind of saw a link. Also, for instance, she translates the anarchist patrol groups as irregulars, which is the term used for the kind of
the IRA irregulars.
So I think that she that was her particular interpretation, and then David Rosenthal's was a more kind of more peace. Emphasis was on the kind of peace, coming of peace. It's in the time of the doves. It gives it that title. And I changed the names of some of the characters because I thought it was very important that it's a novel about a working class woman trying to survive the civil war in Barcelona. Her husband's gone to the front, and he kind of dies, and so she's struggling to bring up these children and feed them. When particularly when the kind of the war is going badly from the point of view of the Republic, and it's desperate times in Barcelona. And I thought, I wanted to show that through my translation. That it was like the kind of the working class women, on the home front, struggling to survive while the war is being fought in a different way on the front in Aragon. And so I changed the names of the main characters to give them a kind of more English working class turn to them, and particularly, really, the name of the heroine, like Philometa, who is kind of a little pigeon. I called her Pidgey.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that that was in a kind of an affectionate term, and to leave it as Kulometa would mean nothing to kind of English readers.
It means if you leave it as Colometa, it's more an exotic, foreign sort of term.
Well, it sounds romantic, but of course people don't even know how to pronounce it. They would say Colometa, which is Colomita. Readers wouldn't know how to pronounce it. And I was also kind of translating against an interpretation of La Plaza del Diamant that sees it in terms of Pidgey being some kind of symbol of the Catalan struggle for freedom, and being a kind, in some ways, a woman who is pure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she's not. She's a working class woman who is looking back on her life and telling her story with all of the kind of articulacy of what she experienced brings.
Mm-hmm. Do you know, one of the things that occurs to me with all your translations and with things like La Plaza del Diamant in Diamond Square is there have been the editors, and there's been your input to suggest things to editors. There's been the publishers, the New Review of Books, Open Letter, people in Britain, Maclehose, and so on. There's been the people who have been prepared to publish these books, but do they have any readers? Is publishers sold a lot of their books, like the Rurereda book, which Virago did in Britain? Has that sold a lot?
I've got no idea. I mean, it went from hardback into paperback, but I've changed. I mean, I've changed address and so on, and they probably failed to keep up with me, and I've failed to keep up with them.
Got checks waiting for you in Barcelona.
If only. So I'm going to do a novel by Victor Catalan, Caterina Albert, called Un film 3,000 metros, which is a very interesting novel written by Caterina Albert in 1919, set in Barcelona, and very surreal. And Chad Post at Open Letter decided to do that on the basis of a talk he heard when he was over in Barcelona with a group of publishers on these visits that the Institut Ramon Llull organizes. So I think it's there's a kind of combination of willingness on the part of some publishers to take risks and to kind of approach areas of European literature that they're not familiar with. The input from translators and the input from cultural organisations like the Institut Ramon Llull. It was fortunate that some of these books have got well reviewed, so that helps as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Certain Glory, for instance, was named as Kirkus Review, one of the 10 best books of the year, 2017, I think it was, and it was one of the top 10 books of the year for The Economist.
I wanted to ask you too, which you did in 2013, which was The Grey Notebook, Pla's book. And I'd always had an aversion to Josep Pla, because he was a favourite of Jordi Pujol in the 1980s, and he had this picture of Pla as this conservative peasant living out in a country mass in deepest Catalonia. And I thought, I don't want to know anything about this writer. He sounds right-wing, terrible, conservative. And when you did the translation, I started to read it, both in Catalan and your translation, and it actually was a revelation. Other people I've recommended, the Grey Notebook, I've recommended to people in Britain, and they've all enjoyed it, and also the other one you did, Life in Bitters. And how did you, they're very big books, it must have taken a hell of a long time to translate the Grey Notebook. So how long did it take you?
Well, I mean, it did take me a long, they're over 300,000 words, both books. And when I was translating the Grey Notebook, I had a heart problem in the middle of it all, and that had bypassed. So
was that caused by Josep Pla being a cunning Catalan peasant?
I don't think so. No, probably too much Boutifarra. But Life, Life in Bitters also is kind of 300,000 words plus. But for me as well, Pla was a revelation, and having translated the Grey Notebook, I went on to Life and Bitters, and that again is not a work that's as well known in Catalonia, but it's such a different side to him, because it reflects the whole time that he spent in the 1920s as a journalist in different European capitals, and they are wonderful stories reflecting, you know, the kind of political and social situation in those countries, like the hyperinflation in Germany, or in Italy with the rise of Mussolini, or the jokey ones about Saint Mungo in Glasgow, or the one about the gay Irishman that he meets, the narrator meets in a cemetery in Meansville in Leeds, and you think, who is this Catalan, this Josep Pla, that is caricatured as the guy, you know, with the cigar and or the cigarette and the glass of wine and the berry in the rural outback.
I can picture them, all these lonely men sitting individually at tables, but observing each other, and Pla not talking very much to them, but watching what they're doing, listening to stories. They're very modernist stories. They're very interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm working on a third book of Pla, which is again very different, which we, you know, Archipelago will publish it in November.
What is the third?
Salt Water, which is a translation of Aguas de Mar, which are a set of stories set on the Costa Brava in the kind of fishing villages, and it's basically about sailing and fishing, smuggling, and stories set in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s. A very different, again, a different view of the Pla of Palafrugell and the Costa Brava, and, you know, a big translation challenge, because apart from his kind of stylistic originality, there's the whole kind of lexis and the world of boats and fishing, fishing tackle, to be translated, and that's so I kind of translated that surrounded by stacks of glossaries and so on.
Yeah, I was thinking we ought to come back to Monzó books, and now your latest one is YYY, which is El Parque de Tot Plegat.
It came out in November, I think.
And they're fantastic stories, but quite cruel stories. I mean, I'm not saying the author is cruel, but they're very funny because they just have a man or a woman or people with unpronounceable names, very urban, people very ruthless, very much modern lives, sort of, and it's all turned up a notch. It's all sort of modern disasters, relationships which don't work out, all sort of screwed up a notch to make it sort of horrendously comic. So how did you've done a lot of Monzó, what do you think of him?
I think he's preferred the short story genre. It's kind of like the scenes of Barcelona life, and scenes of middle class life in Barcelona, really. Although the presence of Barcelona is not there in terms of streets and physical description. It's in the relationships between individuals. But there are also the stories that are kind of parodies or kind of ironic riffs on the writer, like the short story writer who has written this perfect short story, but he can't find the right title for it, so he ends up ripping it into pieces. But there's that story of the young boy whose mother. The mother kind of goes to clean in a kind of grand house in the Eixample, and she takes her son, and it's a doctor's house, and she takes her son along with him because she's not got anything else to do with her young son, and the doctor has a son who's going to die. He's got some wasting illness, and the two boys play, and of course the rich boy has got loads of toys and everything he could need. And the poor boy loves these kind of sessions of playing, and also having the food and drink that the little boy has. And then the boy dies, and the cleaner's son thinks, "Oh, well, I hope you'll give me that special game that we really both enjoyed." And he's waiting for the doctor's family to kind of say to his mother, you know, would your son like some of the games? And the call never comes.